Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the AANS CNS headline for the tumor section. And we're very excited to be here tonight and share this evening with you. My name is Isabel Germana. I'm the chair of the tumor section. And I have with me Susan Panulo and Brian Nyhead, who are the chair for this event. Susan, you want to take it from here?
Hey, hi. So thank you all for joining us. We've had a really great time with the prior headlines programs. I think you guys will have an awesome time tonight as well. As you know, we take turns introducing each other, as in you guys have to do that. We'll just kind of move things along. And we'll start with Lola introducing Michael.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Ivan. Dr. Ivan is an associate professor of neurosurgery and the director of the Brain Tumor Fellowship Program at the University of Miami. He is also the director of research at the University of Miami Brain Tumor Initiative, as well as the co-director of neuro-oncology at the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. Within the tumor section, he serves as a member of the skull base subcommittee. And with that, I'll hand it off to Michael to tell us something interesting from your practice these days.
Great. Thanks so much, Lola. Yeah, can everybody see that?
Yep, good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just thought I'd take a moment to talk a little bit about my practice. But before, I just wanted to thank the tumor section for inviting me. It's really an honor to be amongst this really collegial group of amazing tumor researchers. So here at my lab and my research really kind of focuses on brain tumor invasion. It's something I've been passionate about ever since a resident. And this is kind of the umbrella kind of view of how I kind of am looking at it currently. We have a great biobank of tumor cells that we've been growing in the lab from our GBM patients. And we've actually correlated nicely that these tumor cells actually invade in culture and in models very similar to how our patients' recurrence grows. And so when they recur on the opposite side of the brain, they actually invade faster in our models. And when they don't, they invade less. And so we've been working with a new organoid model that could kind of detect automatically how these tumor cells migrate. And then we were lucky enough to present our in vivo work with a mouse model at the last CNS, where we were able to actually modify kind of the CD97 G-coupled protein receptor in 6 different mutants. And one of the mutants actually was able to inhibit tumor and kind of migration across the corpus callosum, which we're really excited about, and we're publishing now. And then the next step will take multiple kind of years to figure out, which is why as a brain tumor surgeon, you kind of always want to be working on something that's in the operating room at the same time, which is why the next two kind of columns there are kind of what we've been looking at now with our patients, which is new ways to detect invasion and visualize it. So using Raman spectroscopy, imaging, using an artificial intelligence, we can now actually see kind of these tumor migration margins, which we really, the first time we're able to do that in real time. But then more interestingly is, so how do you use that data? How do you collect that data? How does a surgeon quantify that data? And we've developed this new kind of automated augmented reality platform that could kind of collect all this data, quantify it in real time, and allow the surgeon to see it to really make kind of novel decisions using kind of statistical data while they're operating. And we're excited on where that's going to go. And hopefully one of the students will make a breakthrough with that in the clinical trial that we're starting in another month or two. So moving on to my personal tidbits.
And I apologize. I believe that we're crossed on the screen. So let me just fix that real quick. And there you go.
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, so my family is my life, and they just are the things that make me the happiest. My wife, Tatiana here, my 2 sons, Mikey and Matthew. My wife is also a physician. We met in medical school and then went out to UCSF together to do our training. And she's by far the better Dr. Ivan, and especially because she answers all my family's friends and relatives' questions about medical problems, because she's a family physician. And then my 2 boys, who are just the adventure seekers, as you can see here. They love getting out of Miami and kind of getting outdoors. Here we are at Halloween. We were Top Gun. they are my Mavericks, and I was a Rooster. It was a super fun time. But yeah, I can't say enough about them. They're just the reason I look forward to every next day. So 2 facts and 1 fiction. For Lola here, I guess, was the first was that I won the Neurosurgeon in Rockies ski racing cup 3 years in a row. 2, hold a black belt in 2 styles of karate, and 3, to rock climb multiple domes, including Half Dome in Yosemite. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I've been looking at this and I've been tempted to choose several different options here, but based on the fact that I see climbing and I see skiing and I don't see any karate, I'm going to say that the fiction is the black belt and 2 styles of karate.
Actually, no, it's number 3, the climbing. Yeah. No karate for a while. That was high school and college, but yeah, I taught in high school and college, and they recruited me to the second type of karate. And then the first one was kind of a funny story. This was as a resident. Dr. Lawton recruited me on one of his projects to go out to Beaver Creek to present at the famous Neurosurgery of the Rockies conference from University of Colorado, which Ryan may talk about later. But and of course I was excited. I was like, yes. But little beknownst to me was that behind the scenes he was making a side bet with Steve Ogeman on my skiing abilities, since I raced in college at Cornell. And it wasn't until like the night before that I found out that they had made this the first year they were making a cup with engraving, and they were putting prize money behind it. And Lawton had already bet on me, and he's like, make sure when you go out there, you race in this race that I installed you. I already signed you up for, and if you don't come home. So it went out the next 3 years, and but since those 3 years, I haven't been invited back. So hopefully,
yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, if you were a ski racer at Cornell, like who eventually was the neurosurgeon that beat you? But so it sounds like they just stopped allowing you to compete.
Yeah, it's a pretty high level racing though. They have a couple people who race the European circuit that they recruit every year, including one of the attendings at University of Colorado. So it's intense, but always a ton of fun.
Well, that is very impressive, but I think you need to climb Half Dome, because that one's on my list too.
It is on my list.
Excellent.
Okay, great. So then I have the privilege of now introducing Dr. Lola Chambliss. Really an honor to introduce her. She is associate professor and the residency director at Vanderbilt, and also part of their ENT division. She's also very active on the tumor section, currently co-chairing the Innovation and Technology Subcommittee. And we all know she's extremely active in CNS and has just really done an amazing job, including her most recent role as the annual program chair for the very successful meeting in San Francisco. And congratulations to her on that. We've known each other for a while. She helped me out with some of the practical courses on medical students like 7 or 8 years ago, and was always one of the best speakers. And then also as a leader, as one of my mentors on the CNS leadership program. So really admired her, and looking forward to her sharing her thoughts tonight.
Thank you so much. That's very kind. So I thought I would just kind of hone in on one sort of recent favorite paper that my lab put out last year. When I joined the faculty at Vanderbilt 10 years ago, my interest was in brain tumor outcomes research primarily, and I do have a hand in a lot of other types of projects, but that was what my own lab was focused on. But 4 years or so into that, I got really interested in big data and machine learning. And that's a topic that I knew nothing about before having introduced to me by a medical student that was doing a research year with me. And it's really changed the direction of what I do. And so at this point, I still study a lot of the same questions that I was always interested in, but I try to study them all through kind of a really different methodology and framework. And so, long been interested in figuring out ways that we can sit in clinic at the point of care and better predict how patients are going to do, be that whether a patient's going to have a complication, be that how long their operation is going to take, how long they're going to be in the hospital, whether they're going to go home from the hospital or need something else. All these are kind of the questions that patients want to know when we're meeting with them in clinic. And I find that, at least in my own experience, we're often somewhat anecdotal. We always remember our last worst case, perhaps sometimes our last best case, unfortunately. And we don't tend to have a lot of evidence from our own practice necessarily to really guide us. And so we took a really simple question a few years ago because we really wanted to demonstrate the power of this methodology rather than, ask the coolest question in neurosurgery. So we said, where do patients go after meningioma resection? Are they in the hospital a short period of time and they go home? Did they go to SNF? Did they go to rehab? Did they go to LTAC, et cetera? And we had originally built a model off of national databases, that tens of thousands of cases that we, found worked pretty well, sort of a basically machine learning ensemble model. And then we did that within our own institution. We identified every conceivable variable we might want to look at out of the records, built a very highly predictive model based on that work, and it seemed to perform pretty well. And then we just put all that to the side and said, well, can we do something really simple that takes much less time and resources to extract all this data? And can we use natural language processing, looking just at the surgeon's history and the radiology note, and predict who is going to go home from the hospital and then who's going to go to all these other places? And it turns out that, yes, you can. And you can actually predict it with even more fidelity than this model that we built using every conceivable variable I could come up with. We were interested in seeing that in our own institution, but with NLP, you really wonder whether you're overfitting models. And so we were lucky in this paper to be able to collaborate with Dr. Carter and the surgeons at MGH, and to run the same model off of all of their meningioma patients over a 10-year period and demonstrate that it worked just as well. And so I just think this is kind of an interesting concept where, you can, imagine that we are storing and processing lots of really interesting information in just the language that we're speaking in a short history about a patient or a short radiology report that is actually more predictive of how that patient's going to do. It speaks to the fact that the physician actually knows things they don't realize they know. And a little subshoot of this project that we just submitted as an abstract somewhere was really cool is we actually watched physicians over time, for those that had been in practice the longest. And we saw that the predictive nature of their histories improved to the first 5 to 7 years in practice, and then really stabilized and just stayed at this highly predictive rate after that. And it's just interesting to think about what we're learning all the time and not even realizing we're learning. And I think it kind of is a nice project that shows that we can maybe push back against the idea that, we should be, every note should be templated and there's nothing worth gaining out of our notes anymore. Turns out maybe there actually is. So I thought this is kind of a fun one to throw out there. And then we can go on to my next slide, more fun stuff for sure. So not unlike Michael, I'm also kind of an adventurer. There's a few thrill seekers in the neurosurgery community. So when I'm not at work, I'm trying to basically get outside someplace really beautiful and do something that kind of pushes my limits a little bit. I really like to ski, and I like to ski things I probably shouldn't be skiing, but I'm definitely not as fast as you, Michael, so will not be competing against you. I have 2 girls, Harper and Sims, are 8 and 10. And it turns out, like, if you put kids in a slot canyon, there's really only one way out. It's kind of like neurosurgery residency. So they'll usually agree to proceed down the canyon. And then I have a picture there of my partner, Scott, who's also a neurosurgeon at Penn State, who has been injured on virtually every adventure I've ever taken him on, to the point where he now goes and uses the Peloton while I go climb the mountains. And that seems to be the right compromise that's going to keep us both physically intact. In terms of my 2 facts and 1 fiction, these are the 3. I'm afraid to drive across bridges. I've been to all 7 continents, and I once ate 9 lobster tails in one sitting.
Oh, also quite tricky. I can't imagine that you're afraid of the bridges because of all of your adventuring going on here. 7 continents is tough. Antarctica is a pretty tough one to get to. But lobster tails, that's also quite a sitting. I'm going to go with the last one, the 9 lobster tails.
I'm sorry, but you're wrong. Med school, spring break, I went on a girls' trip to Grand Cayman. They had an all-you-can-eat lobster thing, and all these other girls were like, "What is wrong with you?" As I proceeded to eat 9 big lobster tails and 1 potato, I might add. But really like lobster. Grew up in Boston. No, I'm afraid to drive across bridges as well, but I have not been to all 7 continents yet. It's hard to get there in a neurosurgery career, because I think you're right. Antarctica is a long way to go. So the bridges don't keep me from going places, but I really do not enjoy driving across them. Don't know why. It's unknown.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Okay. And so next we have Randy introducing, tell me if I'm pronouncing this right. Is it Waj?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Yay. Okay. Waj. So Randy's introducing Raj. Now it's on you, Randy. Go for it.
Okay. So Waj is the assistant professor and co-director at the Michigan Medicine Multidisciplinary Brain Tumor Clinic, Department of Neurosurgery, University of Michigan. He is on the Tumor Executive Committee and is on the membership committee working with our group.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Jensen. So, I'll talk to you about some of the research that I'm doing, what I'm interested in. What I'm trying to do is I spend a lot of time and effort in the lab trying to understand why glioblastomas recur. We all know they always recur. We don't really have great models for them. We don't really understand why they recur. I developed this really nice model as a resident that I use to kind of extract some really cool data. But now I'm kind of trying to study patient tumors a lot more. And so I'm trying to understand resistant cell populations, what role they play in resistance and recurrence. And, as time has gone on, I've realized the importance, and I think as a field, we've all realized the importance of the tumor microenvironment and what role it plays. A cell on its own is not important. It's the cell context. Where is it located? So lately, what I've been doing in the last year and a half or so, I've been doing a lot of sequencing using spatial transcriptomics, essentially taking samples from different sites in tumors, doing spatial transcriptomics, as well as single cell sequencing. And essentially what we're doing is trying to map out where those cells are in space, what regions are they located in, what cells are nearby, and what is the phenotype and program of that cell. And so we've discovered a few very interesting cell types that seem to be located in specific locations within perivascular niches, that seem to be associated with macrophages, and seem to be, at least in our animal models, driving recurrence. So this is what we're focused on in the lab, understanding recurrence and the role the microenvironment plays. And it's nice being a neurosurgeon that you can sample any tumors you like, any regions. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. And I often do a multifocal sample for a lot of these tumors. So the bottom right here is just an atlas of our 35 single cell samples that we've also done multifocal sampling, and a lot of those also have spatial sequencing involved. All right, so I guess we can go to the next slide. So these are my personal tidbits. I love to travel, and COVID limited that for a while, but now we're back to it. And I always like to travel with my kids and my wife, who's also a physician. Over the summer, we went to Turkey, we went to Iran, and we just came back from Spain. So these are the last two pictures are in Spain that we really enjoyed. And I guess the two facts and one fiction. I am from Michigan. We don't have a long summer, but I am an avid gardener, or potentially I'm a bow hunter. That's the third one there. There's a lot of deer hunting in Michigan. And I think bow hunting is probably a cooler way to do it than using a rifle. One possibility, one other potential fact for fiction is that I'm learning calligraphy, Arabic calligraphy. So Dr. Jensen, take a guess. You don't really know me well, but.
Wow, that's tough. I just don't picture you as a bow hunter, but I guess I could ask you some broadhead questions or something, but I'm thinking that one. I'm thinking not a bow hunter.
Yeah, not a bow hunter. My wife would not let me hunt, unfortunately. We have lots of deer in my backyard. I'm always very eager to see if I can pick them off, but she does not allow me to do that. But I do garden. There's some nice pictures of some veggies over the summer that we picked. And I am learning Arabic calligraphy. I'm not very good. My instructor who's teaching me Arabic calligraphy I asked him how long it would take for me to be any good. He said, well, I wouldn't be able to put my stamp on you until about 10 years. So longer than neurosurgery residency. So I'll be at it for a while. That's it. Thank you so much.
I think the vegetables are a safe way to go. That's good.
All right, so Waj, you're going to introduce Randy.
Absolutely. And so Dr. Jensen, many of you guys know very well. He's a professor of neurosurgery, also a professor in radiation oncology and oncological sciences. He's a clerkship director and former residency program director at the University of Utah. Within the Tumor Executive Committee, he's the chair of the membership subcommittee, which I also serve under.
You know, I made this slide some time ago. I've forgotten. So this is a recent clinical trial that we did. It was based on some prior work where we were able to use perfusion MRI to specifically interrogate areas of brain tumors and then correlate that with expression of hypoxia controlled molecules. And we decided we'd take that one step further and look at using 2-hydroxyglutarate spectroscopy for non-enhancing tumors and perfusion MRI for enhancing tumors in our intraoperative MRI. So we did all of that pre-op. We did those imaging studies pre-op, then we resected, and then in the operating room where the residual tumor, where we thought there might be residual, we did either 2-hydroxyglutarate spectroscopy in the non-enhancing or perfusion in the enhancing tumors, and then correlated that. And we enrolled 50 patients. It just finished about 4 months ago. And I'm there's so much data that we collected, trying to get the correlation. But one of the, and I don't have the picture of it, but one of the interesting things is we had an independent pathologist look at just the histology alone. And it turns out that you're not very good at picking areas, especially a non-enhancing tumor, of areas that you think are completely free. Because I wanted some samples of what I called, peritumor edema outside of the tumor that we were going to do some subtraction genomics on, and it turns out there's a lot of tumor in those places as well, even when you don't think there is, which kind of goes back to, I guess, what we've known for a long time with these infiltrative gliomas. So that was kind of a fun little project that took a number of years, and hopefully we'll get the publications out pretty soon. Yeah, we like to travel. My wife and I, we were in the Galapagos Islands last year diving on a diving trip, and we just got back. Actually, I'm a little jet lagged today because we were in Vietnam doing a bike trip going from Hanoi down to Saigon and then into Cambodia. Did this biking, so we have a lot of fun and have a great family. Have a son and 2 daughters. So am I supposed to just read those? I think. So these are my 2 facts, 1 fiction. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter. I have a workshop with many tools, including a plasma cutter, milling machine, MIG and TIG welders, table and band saws, and automotive lifts. And I read and write symphonic music, play the violin and piano, and dream of performing in a professional orchestra.
Those are also tough ones. I'm going to say the fiction is the 3rd one.
The fiction.
So it's 2 facts and a fiction, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Or are they all facts?
No. I don't. I love to go to the symphony and opera, but I don't play an instrument, and I certainly don't write any music. So
Wonderful. You got it right away.
All right, you got that one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
So next we have Ian introducing Ryan, right? Yep, there we go.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I don't know Ryan personally, although I'm looking forward to meeting him at the subsequent meeting, maybe at the AANS. But it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ryan Ormond. He's the Associate Professor of Neurosurgery and Director of the Brain Tumor Program at University of Colorado. He's also co-director of the Neurosurgical Oncology Fellowship Program. In his current role in the tumor section, he is the co-chair of the Guidelines Committee. And so with that, I'll let you take it away, Ryan.
All right, thank you. Sorry, an OR is running a little late, so, as per usual, right? So I'm not quite as fancy as everybody else here. We were curious about our breast cancer brain metastasis population because they seemed anecdotally to have a higher rate of presenting with obstructive hydrocephalus. So we started investigating that, and we looked at that specifically at spatial distribution of metastatic breast cancer in the brain, how this potentially differed from expected volumetric distribution, and then compared it specifically to not only just volumetric distribution, but also lung cancer metastatic to brain. And could you push next? Thank you. And in our study of approximately 3,000 tumors, we found that metastatic breast cancer is found to more frequently develop in the parietal lobe, caudate, diencephalon, medulla, and cerebellum. So along midline structures, this correlates with estrogen or aromatase activity in the brain in humans. And next, can you push forward? Thank you. Midline position of these regions makes obstructive hydrocephalus much more likely in breast cancer brain metastasis than other metastases. And specifically in related to lung cancer, it's about a 10-fold increase in risk for presenting with obstructive hydrocephalus. Would you go next? I think that, oh, and here's our fact and fiction. So again, your top slide there, as you can imagine, that's the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. These are the headwaters of the Arkansas River. And in the background on the left is the tallest mountain in the Rocky Mountain chain, which is 14,440 feet, which is Mount Elbert. And then to the right, you only see about half of it because of cloud cover, but it's the highest mountain in the lower 48 in terms of mass of the mountain, over 14,000 feet. It's called Mount Massive. It's about 30 feet lower than Mount Elbert. They're both in the Sawatch chain and near the headwaters of the Arkansas River. So my family likes going up into the Arkansas River Valley quite frequently. We have a place up there where we spend time, kind of year round to get away from Denver. And this is a nice fall shot with snow on the mountains and some of the fall colors along the river. So a couple questions, see which one you think is correct. 1, I have 5 children. 2, I've been a licensed river guide in multiple states. 3, I sing poorly on purpose at birthday parties.
I guess I don't know you well enough to really have an educated guess, but number 3 seems awfully specific. So I'm thinking that it's there on purpose, but so yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go with that one.
Okay, so that's true. So we have a long-standing family tradition of singing poorly at birthday parties. And what's wrong is that I have 6 children, not 5 children. So it's a little bit of a red herring because I do have a lot of children. Some people here know that, but anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Ryan.
Excellent. Okay.
Now, I have the privilege again, like Ian said, we haven't had the privilege of getting to know each other real well, but look forward to that in the future. But Ian Lee is co-director of the Hermelin Brain Tumor Center at Henry Ford Health, and on the executive committee for the tumor section. He is a member of the membership subcommittee.
All right, thanks, Ryan. So yeah, it's so just highlighting a little bit of research that we recently put out. This is a recently came out in the Red Journal. Basically, I mean, I'm not as senior as some of the members on this call today, but sort of, the longer that I do surgery for recurrent glioblastoma, the more depressing it becomes. And essentially what we've been doing laser ablation now at Henry Ford Hospital for since 2013, so going on 9 years. And we took a cohort of patients with first-time recurrent glioblastomas with small areas of recurrence in surgically accessible locations. So these were patients who, before LIT, and even in the era of LIT, were patients that typically go on to resection, repeat resection. And then more lately, either because of patient preference or because of various other sort of systemic factors, frailty, for instance, we elected to do a laser ablation instead. I will say that at Henry Ford, generally speaking, I will still, the main driver for me to do a repeat resection for recurrent glioblastoma is to try to get them on a clinical trial. But if there is no clinical trial for them, then I'll tend to offer a laser ablation. And what we found was that for those patients who had a surgically accessible small recurrence, our survival outcomes, both overall survival and progression-free survival, were essentially quite similar for LIT and open resection. I would say the caveat to those were that there was a subset of patients who were able to get a supramaximal resection, and those patients had prolonged survivals, progression-free survivals as well. So I think that's not altogether surprising if you believe that site reduction is the same whether you do it by an ablation or by a resection. I think for us, what that means is that, again, as the practice has evolved over the course of years, like for those patients who are clinical trial candidates who need a resection for that reason, those are the patients that offer surgery, a resection to. But for those patients who are not a resection candidate, either because of other disqualifying criteria or if they're too far away, they seem to be good candidates for LIT. So now I'll go on to my more personal stuff on the next slide. So I guess I would consider myself a Henry Ford lifer at this point. I actually met my wife at the hospital. She was a nurse on the neuro floor. We met during residency, got married, and we have 2 children, a 10-year-old and an almost 4-year-old. And the pictures you have here, the first day of a preschool for my 3-year-old, and then also a recent visit that we made to the apple orchard. For those who are familiar with Michigan, Cider and Donuts is sort of a fall institution in Michigan. As far as my 3 tidbits, I'm an avid runner, having competed over 10 marathons. I became a home baker during COVID, and then I'm a big fan of hot Cheetos.
So this is challenging, not knowing you. I'm going to go the safe route and assume you're a good baker and you run a lot, and just say you don't like hot Cheetos.
All right. So, can we go to the next slide? So actually, so I guess we can just put all the pictures. So I actually did become quite an avid home baker when we were in lockdown. Essentially, idle hands became the playthings of the devil, right? So I began growing a lot or baking a lot, but then also I really, I actually do like hot Cheetos a lot. And actually everybody at the hospital knows that if they want me to do something, they need to bring hot Cheetos. Even patients know that now. And I really hate running with a passion. So that's, although I did get into HIIT during COVID, so I managed to able to keep that up for the last couple of years.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you.
That's great. All right, so next we have Raj introducing Emanuela, right?
Great. Thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for the opportunity. So I have the pleasure of introducing Emanuela Benello. So she's a really brilliant brain tumor surgeon who had completed all of her graduate degrees in Boston at Harvard and at MIT, including a Doctor of Science, her MD, and her PhD. She's currently an assistant professor of neurosurgery and director of neurosurgical oncology at Boston University. And on the executive committee, she's currently a member of the research subcommittee, where she, including amongst the things that she does, she reviews NREF applications, and she's also a candidate member of the guidelines committee. So Emanuela, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Raj, for this kind introduction, and thank you also for including me in this activity that I've enjoyed participating on as a participant before. So I began my tumor journey really primarily in the lab, and this was my passion project initially, where I was trying to explore the potential for fenofibrate in the treatment of glioblastoma. And fenofibrate is an alpha agonist in clinical use for hypertriglyceridemia, which is involved in fatty acid oxidation. We're looking basically at a cell-based model, and did find that it could inhibit proliferation and in cells, and it also could have anti-invasive effects in a glioma stem cell model. And the primary driver for looking at this fenofibrate was really to have something that could be used in a resource-poor environment that could be easily accessible to many people. And then that really, I really jumped into a resource challenged a little bit environment as a faculty member at Boston Medical Center, which is considered a safety net hospital. And my efforts have been really aimed at the delivery of brain tumor care to minority patients and or underserved patients, as well as shared decision-making. And these are just two cases that highlight some of the challenges of delivery of brain tumor care in this environment. And the first one was just a 30-year-old who presented with headaches after having recently crossed into the United States from Central America with this very large interventricular neurocytoma extending down to the third ventricle. And, it was just very challenging from a socioeconomic standpoint, with some poor and limited social supports, challenging in the operating room, just from a technical standpoint, of some of the somewhat at times suboptimal operating room resources, and then challenging post-operatively because there's a lot of barriers for discharge because people don't have rehabilitation benefits, and really can either be in a hospital or go home, and there's nowhere really else for them to go, and they need to be pristine and to be able to go home. And fortunately, this patient was intact and was able to go home and then start working shortly thereafter her discharge from the hospital, which was very fortunate. And the second case is a 19-year-old who presented with a left eye proptosis and decreased visual acuity in the setting of a known optic nerve glioma. And I'm not very frequently, per se, a second or third opinion, just by the nature of the environment I practice in. And this patient came to me because she felt like she wasn't being heard with her particular goals of what she wanted from surgery, which was to be able to wear her hair up from her face so that she could go to college. And the main consensus had been for a full resection and enucleation of the eye and a synthetic globe. And she really wanted to keep her globe. And she's a 19-year-old girl. She wants to go to college. This was so important to her. And so we were able to really accomplish the goal and the risk to benefit ratio that she wanted, which was really we did a subtotal resection and really basically fixed the proptosis without impacting any of her residual vision, which was not much, but it was at least some to fingers and to hands. And so it was just really just brought to home, trying to really do a shared decision making and really trying to help patients have a voice in their own treatment plan. While I've been doing this, I have had the honor of mentoring and many of our residents that we share with the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, as well as our pre-residency fellows. And I just have here one example of one of our pre-residency fellows who is currently a neurology resident at Duke who will be a neuro-oncologist. And the last thing I would say that's really captured my attention is really understanding glioblastoma and geographical disparities of care. Just because my own father was diagnosed with glioblastoma and he was in Italy, and it was really quite eye-opening to understand how where you live really can impact the kind of care that you have. And of course, that really brought me a whole new wave of understanding into the applicability of some of our of the treatments that we propose, and certainly has served very well to balance some of my inner, fascination with a lot of the bench work and the molecules, and just to try to really have both aspects of brain tumor care in mind. So those were my tumor highlights. And then I have my personal tidbits. I was born in Turin, Italy. Some people know that as the place for the Shroud of Turin, but I like to think of it as where the Winter Olympics were held in 2006. I came to the US when I was a young girl with my mother and my grandmother. These are just some of the first pictures of me when I was here in the US, and we came to Providence, Rhode Island, when I was very fortunate. I went to a very great secondary school that was Quaker, and I did a lot of activities. I went horseback riding, and I was ballet dancing, and I did a lot of musical activities and piano, violin. And after that, I went to Boston as Raj actually astutely had already looked up, and I got my PhD in nuclear engineering, and I was doing neutron beam design for medical applications. And as I was going on, I really became more interested in the user and the medical applications rather than the techniques, although I was very fascinated by neutron beam design. And then I went on to do my MD, followed by my second PhD, where I was really more into immunology labs and molecules, and because I had been really a full-on engineer before, and then I felt like medicine is very molecular and biological, and you really needed to know that to really understand what was going on. And then I was extremely fortunate, despite my somewhat atypical background. I was to do residency at Mount Sinai in neurosurgery. I was very, very grateful for the training. And then after that, I graduated and went to Boston Medical Center, where I remain to date. So my 2 facts and 1 fiction is, number 1, I love cannolis. Number 2, I speak Italian, English, and Spanish, and I love to dabble in many other languages like French and Russian and Greek and a little bit of Hindi there, Japanese. And number 3 is I have gone scuba diving at Theo's Wreck in the Bahamas on 90 feet.
Nice. So I think you seem adventurous, and so I think 3 is true. Scuba diving seems like that might be up your alley. You were born in Europe, and Europeans tend to speak a lot of different languages. So I think 2 is maybe true. And I think, 1, we might think, just because you're, in Turin, that you might like cannolis, but, people like different things. So I would say maybe 1 is false.
You are completely correct. I actually hate cannolis with passion. I just cannot stand them. I love hazelnuts, which is why I put a picture of the hazelnut. It's a very strong regional thing in Piedmont to have hazelnuts, and I love hazelnut everything. Hazelnut ice cream, hazelnut cake, hazelnut spread. That is my total favorite, and I really please never give me a cannoli. I just can't.
Noted. Good to know.
So there we go. All right, and I guess it's now my turn, and it is really right, Susan? Can I?
Yep, you got it.
Got it. Yeah, it's truly my sincere pleasure to introduce Raj Mukherjee. He is currently the assistant professor of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, director of neurosurgical oncology at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center, as well as assistant program director of the neurosurgery residency program, and has quite a compelling story also of why he got into neurosurgery and of his various family members, which was really, he gives him quite an insight into our patients. On the AANS and CNS section on tumors, he serves as the co-chair of the Early Career Neurosurgeons Subcommittee, which was formerly known as the Young Neurosurgeon Committee. And it's my pleasure. Here's Raj.
Thanks so much, Emanuela. So yeah, we all have our different journeys to neurosurgery. I think for me, there were various family members that had, various, brain tumor, hydrocephalus, this and that, where, it's never great to see a neurosurgeon, especially, when it's a family member of yours. It can be kind of traumatic, but I interacted with a lot of great neurosurgeons and they really impacted me a lot. So so that's in large part why I'm here today, and also having great mentors. In terms of my researchy things, by and large, I do clinically oriented data science work in, clinically relevant neurosurgery. And so that comes in the form of some predictive analytics, developing and validating some quality of life instruments, and then using some kind of mixed methods that I learned as a public health student back in the day. So, I think a lot of folks in recent years have looked at frailty and tried to identify specific biomarkers and metrics by which we can take sort of our eyeball assessment of who might be fit or not fit for surgery and actually try to quantify it. So on the left is a paper that was published in the last year or so in the Red Journal in Neurosurgery, trying to define a better simple metric called the Modified Frailty Index 5, which you'll see a lot of now people are looking into. So that was our institutional work there, and it included Chetan Betagowda, who was a member of the EC and who is it was on one of these headlines previously. The second paper is a quality of life paper where we developed a new quality of life instrument specifically for patients with suprasellular meningiomas, so tuberculum sella and planum meningiomas. And it was a collaborative effort with a lot of people from across the country, including my old mentor at Pittsburgh, Dr. Gardner. It was a collaborative effort. It was a year and a half in the making. We reached out to a bunch of patients, and it was a qualitative paper, but I think it has very practical implications for how we decide, maybe whether patients would, to help with shared decision-making when it comes to, say, an open craniotomy or an endoscopic and a nasal approach. And the last paper was really a crowdsourced kind of approach where we looked at expert opinion when it comes to trying to define what types of patients radiographically might be amenable to a supratotal resection for glioblastoma. So, again, it's trying to define what we can kind of generally have a gestalt feeling for and make it, in an organized kind of way. So there are a lot of people who are on the executive committee that were involved, including on this particular paper, which came out, I think, about a year and a half ago. Brian Nayhead was on there, Mike Ivins, the two folks that are on this call, and Brad Zachariah. So hopefully moving forward, some of this kind of work can help, especially folks like me, junior faculty, kind of have a sense of how to take that wisdom and experience from more experienced people and make it practical to the day-to-day. So with that, I think I have my two truths and a lie. So one of these is false. So I was featured in a national television commercial for the syndicated show Candid Camera. I am a second degree black belt in Shorei-ryu karate. Or one of these is false, or was I a high school state champion in forensics? So two are true, one is false. Emanuela, what do you think?
Well, challenging because they could all be true. So I mean, you have a little Candid Camera here, and Cobra Kai, and
I couldn't find a good picture of people debating.
Trying to get the clues here. I guess if I had to say, I would say, I guess the one fiction is number 3. Maybe you were not a champion of forensics, but something else.
So I think I come across as an agreeable kind of guy, but for whatever reason in high school, I was actually pretty good at that debate stuff. So I was a state champion in debate. I actually was on a commercial for Candid Camera. We went to Universal Studios as a kid, and they put me on a little 20-second commercial. But I am not a black belt in karate, so sorry, Mike, we can't go toe to toe. I'm a brown belt, and then I stopped for some really weird reason. I can't remember why, but that's not impressive to say you're a purple belt or an orange belt, brown belt. So number 2 is false. Number 2 is false.
Thank you. That was great, Raj and Emanuela. Awesome.
All right. Last chair is Michael and Mark. Michael is going to introduce Mark.
All right. So I have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Mark Linsky, who's professor of neurosurgery at University of California, Irvine, and a member and founder of the UCI Chow Family Comprehensive Cancer Center Brain Tumor Program. And for the tumor section, he's a member of the Clinical Trials and Registries Subcommittee. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. Normally, when I give talks related to the tumor section, I talk about clinical issues and clinical outcomes and all things along those lines. But today, I thought I would share something I rarely talk about with the tumor section, and that is some work coming out of our lab, which we've been working on for quite some time now and is now on the cusp of possible translation. So we've been looking at the extracellular matrix in tumors and are very interested in that topic. We're particularly interested in a protein called epidermal growth factor containing extracellular matrix protein 1, or EFEMP1, which is normally present in the human extracellular matrix. It turns out to be a downstream target of transcription factor PAX6, which is a neurodevelopmental gene that we've been studying for over 20 years and is also a glioma suppressor gene. It turns out that EFEMP1 has pleiotropic effects on GBM, so it's not just one mechanism, which is potentially very attractive for a therapeutic agent. It has three good effects and one bad effects. The three good effects are tumor suppressive. The first is that it suppresses tumor growth of the main tumor mass through decreased cell division via an EGFR mechanism. The second is that it suppresses tumor growth and in particular tumor recurrence resulting from peripheral infiltrating glioma cells by stabilizing chromosomal instability so that the tumor mast cells aren't able to change phenotype into infiltrating cells through chromosome 7 dissegregation, which is a key to GBM chromosomal instability. And the third is its antiangiogenic effect via VEGF, which not only affects neoangiogenesis in the traditional manner, but actually turns out to suppress a concept that is often underappreciated in GBM, known as vascular mimicry, where the glioma cells themselves form the vascular channels. The problem when we first started studying this was there was a bad effect too, and that is it promoted individual cell migration through its effect on the tumor stem-like cells, and therefore potentially increased the invasive potential of a malignant glioma. So working with my PhD colleague in crime, Dr. Yihong Zhou, Yihong re-engineered EFEMP1 into multiple different variants, and then we tested all the variants to try and identify one that maintained the three good effects while eliminating the bad effects by truncating parts of the protein. And the result of that was our human fibular variant 3, which is a portion of the normal human extracellular matrix protein, and therefore has very low risk for immune system reactivity since it's part of the normally present extracellular matrix, and low risk for toxicity. We've now completed our in vitro testing for this potentially translatable therapeutic, and our preliminary in vivo animal studies are also complete. We're working now on our animal model toxicity studies as well as clinical delivery options for bringing this to the clinic, and are very excited about this indeed. So that's my thing. Okay, tidbits. So, Dr. Vogelbaum and I are getting a little, long in the tooth and a little slight of the hair on top. And as we get older and later in our twilight careers, you kind of wax nostalgic for the way things were in certain aspects. It sure would be nice if we knew what we knew now, but could go back and still look like we did when we were 19 years old. So, my tidbit is that, I'm kind of waxing nostalgic as I get into the twilight of my career, longing for other days. In terms of my personal tidbits, perhaps I didn't quite understand the instructions. My tidbits are more focused on tumor, but number one, analyzed and published the first North American results for vestibular schwannoma patients treated with gamma knife radiosurgery. Number two, chosen to represent neurosurgery for President Biden's Cancer Moonshot Initiative. And number three, as chair of the AANS CNS Joint Guidelines Committee, initiated, obtained funding for, and helped organize the first joint tumor section metastatic brain tumor evidence-linked clinical practice guidelines efforts. So I'll let Mike take a chew on that.
Well, Mark, I think that one of the things you didn't mention is that you used to be at Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, where I believe you did your training. Isn't that correct? So
that's right.
So number one is definitely true because you were quite active at that time when that program was putting together those series and the like. And I also believe that number 3 is true. You've been pretty involved in guidelines over the years. I'm not so sure though about number 2, whether or not you and President Biden would stand on a podium together. So,
Well, you're absolutely correct. The honor of being in President Biden's Cancer Moonshot Initiative goes to our colleague Mitch Berger, who was chosen for that honor. I'm probably the wrong political party for President Biden anyway, but you're absolutely correct.
okay.
So I have the pleasure and honor of introducing my longtime friend and colleague, Michael Vogelbaum, who I've known and been on many committees with the tumor section for many years, who used to be at Cleveland Clinic, but is currently program leader of neuro-oncology, chief of neurosurgery, and professor at the H. Lee Moffitt Cancer Center and Research Institute in Tampa, Florida. Dr. Vogelbaum is on the AANS CNS section on tumor executive committee. He's the liaison for coding and reimbursement of the coding and reimbursement committee of the AANS and CNS. So all of you who still get paid for doing brain tumor surgery can thank Dr. Vogelbaum for guarding your checkbook.
Well said. So I wanted to highlight 2 points along the journey that I've been taking. I started my career in a pretty traditional way, having done an MD PhD and then did a postdoc during my residency, and started my laboratory when I was at the Cleveland Clinic, focused on trying to identify new targets for GBM. And in thinking about it and thinking about the fact that I wanted to get into therapeutics, I realized I needed to learn how to do clinical trials, which is not really taught in neurosurgery residency. So I got involved with RTOG, it's now known as NRG Oncology, with the express intent of learning how to do clinical research, and got to, my first trial was actually a chemotherapy trial that I ran and learned how to do it along the way. And then I started focusing my lab more on translational questions, because I began to understand that delivery was an issue, and a lot of the drugs that we were developing, especially at that time, small molecule drugs, probably were not going to get into the brain. And I was putting together some trials of those new signal transduction inhibitors, at the same time recognizing the laboratory that they probably weren't going to work. It was sort of learning along the way. And so began to get into the area of what we refer to as phase 0 and window of opportunity clinical trial designs, to really start evaluating this in patients, because ultimately we have unique access to biological samples from our patients and can start addressing these important questions that industry does not understand. And also along the way, helped to co-found and lead RANO, because even within our field, we were having some trouble recognizing which endpoints are really meaningful in clinical trials and addressing a lot of the challenges that we face. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion that systemic delivery is not likely to be the answer for infiltrative parts of gliomas anyway, and started getting very active in the area of direct delivery into the brain. And we did not have technology that was reliable. I have a background in biomedical engineering and recognized that there was an opportunity to engage in device development. So designed and prototyped, and then led the manufacturing and then clinical validation of what we now call the Cleveland multiport catheter. So now we have a vehicle to get therapeutics in the brain. I've been engaging in some first in human studies with that, and working on a new device now, because we need actually chronic delivery. The devices that are currently on the market are all acute or subacute, so we need chronic delivery. So that's my main project now going forward. So this picture tells a story about my family, and what you're seeing here are solar panels on a house in Cleveland, Ohio, where there's snow and 8 months of clouds. Who would do something like that? Well, so many of you know my wife, Judy Rossman, and Judy is actually the only non-technical person in our family. I'll talk a little bit about the kids in a minute, but she said, hey, this is around 2012, said, what wouldn't it be cool if we could get all of our electricity on our roof? And I, said, oh yeah, okay, sure, let's get some solar panels in Cleveland, right? But it's sort of intriguing. It was an intriguing idea, and so I started doing a little bit of research on it and discovered that the highest per capita penetration of solar was in Germany, which is at a higher latitude than Cleveland, Ohio, and has lots of cloud cover. And so went deeper down into the technology and recognized that, yeah, it actually was possible. And our kids were at that age, at that time were in middle school and high school. We tried to get solar panels on our house, and we were in Ohio, and in Ohio, that's a crazy thing to do. And our township tried to block it for 2 years. So, Judy, being who she is, organized rallies and the like, and our kids were pretty inspired by this, to the point where our daughter switched from being a writer to focusing on becoming an engineer, ended up going to MIT to study renewable energy, and is now in the renewable energy sector, now more on the finance side. And we did get the panels on the roof. We got 2/3 of our electricity on the roof, tenfold difference between summer and winter. I have all the spreadsheets, of course. And so our, it's really been inspiring to the family. Our daughter, as I mentioned, is in the renewable sector. She wants to save the world with renewable energy. Our son, who's also technically oriented, but is much more into math and computer science, he's at MIT, wants to go into finance. His contribution to this, he said, that's a really nice dream, but someone has to pay for it. So that's what he's focused on doing, is getting into finance and raising the money to be able to help realize this dream. Okay, and here are my 2 facts and a fiction. Good luck, Mark. So number 1, I completed a triathlon in under 2 hours when I was in my 40s. 2, I relaxed by baking a variety of breads. And 3, I'm originally from the New York area.
Right, so this is a little challenging. Completing a triathlon in under 2 hours when you were in your 40s sounds extreme, therefore it's probably true. With a name like Vogelbaum and with your underlying accent behind your voice, I can certainly imagine that you might be from the New York area. So I'm going to go with the false one being relaxing by baking a variety of breads.
Well, Mark, you're absolutely right. So it was actually, I liked the idea of doing it. In the end, it was Judy who ended up baking a lot of bread because our son had a lot of food allergies when he was young. And so that's what he lived on. And so did I. And so I'm now half the man I used to be. I really, bread is bad for me. I put a lot of weight on and finally said, I've got to do something. And so I told everyone I was going to compete in a triathlon. And, they all looked at me and laughed at me and said, no way. But I did. And because once I said it, I had to do it. And so I trained for it. Now, there's a little caveat there. When I say triathlon, there are different distances of triathlons. I didn't say Ironman. What it was a sprint distance. And I did it in 1 hour, 59 minutes and 45 seconds. So,
15 seconds. It counts.
So I barely made it, but I did. And then the New York area thing. Those of you who are from New York know what the New York area means. It means not from Manhattan. So I'm from northern New Jersey, and that's what people say, right, Susan?
Absolutely right. Michael and I lived a stone's throw from each other when we grew up. That's my claim to fame, as I lived near Mike Vogelbaum. All right, so you guys are the cohort of the last of the headlines series. So this is really a remarkable day in the life. I'm going to let Brian wrap it up out of his black square box, but he's there. So Brian, you want to say bye, and I'm going to say thank you guys so much for contributing to this. It's really fun to get to know each other. And Brian, go for it.
I just wanted to echo not only the thanks, but it's been incredible to meet and hear so much from so many people that we sit across from all the time in either meetings or in rooms. And, credit to Isabel for this really great idea and this initiative, and obviously to my co-chair, Susan, for partnering in this, and to all of you for sharing so much about you, your families, and even your penchants for solar panels, which I appreciate. anyway, thank you to you all, and we look forward to hopefully future events. And we're always open to new ideas. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Isabel.
And wait, before you do that, me and Brian just want to really thank Isabel for her vision of creating this program. And everybody at first always kind of rolls their eyes and says, what? And then we got like 10 emails from people saying, can you tell us exactly what we're supposed to be doing here? And eventually, when you arrive, it all makes sense. But Isabel, thank you for your vision and your idea, and for pushing forward with this and getting everybody to submit all their stuff. So thanks, Isabel.
Well, thank you, Susan and Brian. This was a fun 3 or 4 months. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you everybody for coming over and share. And as Brian and Susan said, there are more events, more things to come, maybe different format, but we're really looking forward to get to know each other better and to continue to build the care for our patients on brain and spine tumors. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Look forward to seeing you in Tampa next week. Right?